Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Lara May, a clinical pharmacist specializing in functional medicine, as well as a certified yoga teacher and Reiki master. I run a truly integrative health coaching practice encompassing functional medicine lab testing, yoga and meditation, and a sprinkling of Reiki energy medicine. Join me here on Light Body Radio to break through your health plateau and come into alignment with your natural vitality. Hello and welcome to Light Body Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Lara May, and today I have with me Allie Cass. She is a former bodybuilding pro turned functional health and fitness coach who helps stressed out women optimize their metabolism, up-level their mindset, and shift from surviving to thriving. She is an advocate for self-love, becoming your best self through mind-body health, and living a life fully alive. So welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you today. I think what we're going to talk about today in terms of like female metabolic health, I really want to go into sort of that age group of, like 40 and above if we can, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation, and just some things that could be cleared up. So I think this is a perfect opportunity to do that. But first, I want to hear about your story and, how you came to be, the expert that you are.
Well, thank you. I will try to give you guys the short version, but essentially I had no intention of ever getting into this field. What I do now has really been a representation of my own journey and the journey of those whom I have been close with. So I grew up as an athlete, went to college, studied business, economics. I'm very much a numbers person. So I just thought I was going to go into the corporate world and, do the thing that we all think that we're going to do. And I did that. So I went into the corporate world right after college, but coincidentally at the same time, right after I graduated, my mother was diagnosed with a rare form of brain cancer. It was very aggressive. She was told that essentially there was really no treatment option other than chemo and radiation. And the whole purpose of that was really just to prolong her life. So I moved across the country. I was in Texas. My parents were in Arizona, and I moved there and I became her primary caregiver along with my father. It was in that process that I really started to see what I like to call kind of the uglier side of Western medicine. No one was talking to us about holistic health. No one was talking to us about nutrition, about lifestyle factors. And perhaps for her journey, it might have been a little too late, but I really started to ask the question of why somebody who is otherwise seemingly healthy gets that kind of diagnosis. I believe that it really became a coping mechanism for me going throughout that process. I was her caregiver for about 9 months before she finally passed away. And in that process, I just started throwing myself down the rabbit hole of research of, what perpetuates cancer, what are contributors, what are some alternative modalities to maybe help support somebody when they're going through a cancer diagnosis and treatment protocol? What does health even mean? What does that look like, right? Because we think of health as like, okay, I go to my doctor and I do these things and they give me this medication and I'm going to be healthier. But like, what does that really mean at a foundational level, and how can we as a society be healthier? So I really just started on this rabbit hole and I became very passionate about it, particularly in the realm of nutrition. It really fueled my fire. I honestly got a little pissed off the more I learned and the more I realized none of these.
That's a natural response.
Thank you. I agree. I'm going to tell my therapist that. No. But yeah, I got angry when I realized that no one on her care team even talked to us about any of those things, and that we just weren't normalizing, like this picture of health at a foundational level with the general population. So fast forward a few months after she passed away, I also found myself at a place where I was not very healthy. I was drinking a lot. I was using outlets to cope with that loss. I was overweight for myself. I was very low energy. I was only 22 at the time too. So I knew, I was like, no, I'm way too young to feel this way now. Now I know that everybody is too young to feel like crap, because you can feel great at any age. But in that moment, I was like, I need somebody to help me because I'm at my rock bottom. So I hired a coach, really just in the realm of fitness to start. And she convinced me that I should do a bodybuilding show. And I was like, that sounds awful, but I guess I'm not really doing a lot else. So why not just throw myself into this world? And I was very fortunate because she was very holistic in nature. Her husband was a functional medicine doctor. And so she took a lot of those principles and implemented them with us, even though what we were training for is very different than what the average individual is seeking to achieve. So I started learning a lot from her. And again, just became so obsessed with women's health and holistic health and just looking at things from a more natural and alternative perspective. So I competed for about a year and a half, got my pro card, and just decided that, you know what, like, this really wasn't rocket science, most of it. And I wanted to share the information. I wanted to learn more. I wanted to help other people. And so that's when I started getting into this aspect of my career. And I pivoted from, being in corporate and started taking basically every certification, every continuing education I could get my hands on, to the point where my mentor's like, do you really need to keep doing that? And I'm like, probably not, but I love it. Yes. And that's been about 8 years ago now. So it's become such a passion of mine. And, the more I work with women and the more I'm exposed to different things, the more I realize there's such a need for that support when it comes to women's health.
Yeah. And just for all of our male listeners out there too, I want to say, like, the reason we have these shows is because we are biologically fundamentally different. And so what helps a female be a strong athlete, be a high performer, or even go from couch potato to, running a 5K or being in some semblance of sort of shape is completely different for a woman than it is for a man, because of these hormonal factors that we're dealing with all the time. So can you sort of like, let's start there with sort of like, what is, maybe like a foundational approach that any woman of any age could really start with. And then I want to move into, some of the, I hate that word middle age, but the advancing age female challenges.
The wiser females.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, honestly, at a foundational level, all the things that are going to help, most women, regardless of what specific condition they're dealing with or what their specific goal is, it's all this stuff that we see that's like, we're like, oh, that's so unsexy that I'm just going to ignore it. So that's going to be prioritizing your sleep. And I'm not just talking quantity, but quality of sleep, recovery, making sure that we're moving our bodies. Now, I have my preferred styles of training for my clients based on what they come to me for and for myself. But, movement in general can be medicine. And so finding things that you also enjoy doing in your day-to-day life and just being more active for most people. Now we have our overtrainers, but as you mentioned, if you're a couch potato or you're somebody who's not moving enough, just having more movement in your day. High quality nutrition. So even, without going down the rabbit hole of calories, macros, specific diets with names on them, making sure that we are getting all the micronutrients we need. I see that a lot with women as they hyper focus so much on the quantity of food that they're eating, but they don't pay enough attention to vitamins, minerals, enzymes, amino acids, essential fatty acids, those types of things that really can make or break how your body is functioning metabolically, hormone production, all of those things, regardless of if we're in a calorie deficit or not. And so really focusing on high quality nutrition, making sure that we are drinking sufficient water and that we're drinking high quality water. So again, filtered water. And then addressing stress. I know it's kind of become like a big topic in the last few years. And when I talk with clients about stress, yes, we're talking about the stressors that we are facing on a day-to-day basis. So whether that's financial, business, relationship, internal stressors like inflammation, blood sugar dysregulation, all of those things, but also, what happened in your past 10 years ago that you haven't let go of. So that's one of the things I've started to see a lot with women, and it was in my own experience, when we carry those heavy emotions and we carry those traumatic experiences with us, that impacts us at a cellular level, particularly over time if we're constantly living in that state. So I think just addressing those things, and making sure you have all of that dialed in is really important, regardless of what your goal is and what you're currently experiencing, before you get down into the weeds. Because anybody can, throw a fancy supplemental protocol on something, or, get really like at a micro level, very nuanced. But if we don't have those foundations nailed down and we're not doing them consistently, in my opinion and in my experience, all the other stuff is just going to work very marginally.
Right. Yeah. And, like you said, you sort of alluded to, like, some of these things have become, I don't know, not like, what do you call it when it's like a trendy word?
Like a buzzword.
Yes, thank you. What is that called? But really, your sleep is hormonally driven. Your quality and quantity really is hormonally driven. And then also stress is hormonally driven, and or if you're bringing in stress from outside sources, then that is driving your hormone balance or imbalance, right? So there's very real biological consequences to all of those things you just mentioned. Even the clean water, like, where is your water coming from? Even if it's coming from the tap, have you run, there's I don't know if it's from the EWG or maybe it's like a resource from Berkey, but you can type in your zip code and get like a water report.
Yes,
So
EWG for sure does that.
Yeah. But, so even if you're drinking tap water, you can see what's in it. How much arsenic is in your water that you're drinking. That's probably not great for you. So, becoming intentional and aware with these foundational things, again, important at any age.
Right.
So, and then also too, the only other thing I'll like piggyback off what you said is, when it comes to that movement, is finding something that you love and doing that. Like, don't necessarily, like, if you hate spinning or you hate being on a bicycle, don't go to a spinning class. Or if you like are not coordinated and jumping over like a stair step, like, don't go to body pump or whatever those classes are. You'll just get irritated and frustrated, and you'll create more inflammation. So find something that you like and do that. Like, you don't have to stick with anyone's really rules about this. It's just as long as you're moving. That's the important thing, because the old saying of use it or lose it is true. If we don't keep using our bodies every day, then that's when we start feeling stiff and quote unquote old, or, and just because we have these labels or definitions of, well, this is what it means to get old, that doesn't mean that those aren't true either. I'm right there with you. Like,
it's funny.
I'm not buying into any of that.
I agree. And I now find it like mildly comical. I feel like it's almost like a coping mechanism when I have somebody who they're like, well, I turned 50 last year and blah, blah, blah. Like, now they have all these issues. And I'm like, I know plenty of people who are 10, 15, 20 years older than you who are thriving. So it's not always about age.
No. And how much of that is happening because we are expecting it to? How much are we actually self-manifesting it to? And, like, people can get really fired up. Well, why would you ever say that? Like, were you telling me I brought this on myself? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's empowering, it should be. Like, I'm not to like judge or lay blame, but it's to empower, to be like, well, if you created this, then you can uncreate it.
Right.
So let's talk about what we can create. And I also want to talk about like the concept of movement and building strength for functionality and for health. Like, no more of this, be a certain size, fit into a certain mold, look a certain way. F that too.
Right.
The F that show.
I love it. I came on at the right day.
Yeah, you did. So let's talk about that. Like, where do you think we should start, or maybe like start to shift our approach and perspective when it comes to let's just even say like weightlifting, like being a strong female.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Like, especially, as we age, resistance training and not just resistance training to look a certain way, like you mentioned, to actually be functional and to move well is very, very important. It's important for longevity. It's important to make sure that you're still mobile. It's important for bone density, so many different things. Having better blood sugar regulation. We know that as people age, but, women specifically, since that's who we're talking about, tend to have higher levels of blood sugar as we age, or can become a little more resistant to insulin. And so things like that can be very helpful to have more muscle mass to help kind of counteract those maybe more natural tendencies. Again, going back to that, things naturally happen as we age, but we have a lot of control over how that happens and the pace at which that happens. And so for people, I have a lot of women who are in that kind of 40 up to 60-year-old demographic. And what we typically do is we start them on resistance training and walking. So again, pulling away, especially as we age, from those higher intensity things. Like, we don't really do a lot of HIIT. I'm not anti-HIIT. I just think there's a time and place for it. And for most people who are already very stressed out, and most women as they're going toward menopause and into menopause, and the adrenal glands are now starting to produce more of their hormones, like, I don't want to add to that burden. And so, strength training 2, maybe 3 times a week, and just walking more. Again, maybe finding something that is fun for them. If you are somebody who likes going to group classes, and that is going to be a way for you to start incorporating weights, maybe that body pump class is going to be good for you. The caveat to some of those classes is I think some of them are a little too intense for an hour long. And so it's, again, finding that balance, hiring a trainer, even if it's just to get you started and get you familiar with the movements, make sure that you're moving in a safe manner and that you know how to use equipment, I think is very beneficial, because that's knowledge is power. And those are things that you can, take with you throughout your journey. So starting simple, you don't need to be, I don't know how many of the people in this demographic are, on Instagram all the time or on TikTok, but like those platforms, they showcase very advanced things when it comes to fitness. And most people don't need that, that like shiny object when it comes to movement. They just need to move in functional patterns. So our squatting, our hinging, our pushing, our pulling, really on the pulling too, because most of us are so, we live in a forward state where we're constantly going forward, whether we're driving, we're texting, we're typing. So making sure that we're strengthening that posterior side for better function, for better posture, for better movement throughout the life cycle, and just really nailing in those movement patterns and not making it like something that's a huge ordeal or super fancy. And even if that's just starting with your body weight at home, as long as you don't have any contraindications of why that would be potentially harmful, like that can be a really easy, safe, and simple way to start moving into more of a resistance training protocol.
Yeah. I can tell you, I am one of those people that HIIT trained my way into, obviously it wasn't the only factor, but also a former athlete. I am no stranger to pushing myself, but I pushed myself too far and I was working graveyard. And so like having that stress on the body, on the hormones, and then HIIT training on top of that was just too much. I essentially pushed myself into adrenal fatigue. And I didn't even realize it until I was at what I guess I would consider like a hormonal bottom,
right?
Where like my body just couldn't do it anymore.
And sometimes you don't realize it because like I've had that experience too with like HIIT classes in particular. You don't realize it because you're riding the high of that cortisol so much that you're like, I feel amazing. And then like 3 hours later, you're like, I literally cannot get off my couch. I have a migraine. Like, what is going on? And so I think for women too, as you start to learn and tap into like that own experience of your body and really connect with yourself, like understanding that we can feel good from those things, but it's not always for the right or the best reasons. If we're just running off of stress hormones and eventually we're going to tank later, then it's probably not doing us any benefit.
Yeah. And looking back on it, there was probably some disordered, dysphoric perceptions coming into that too, of not allowing myself to really rest and recover and, the whole rest and digest concept, where I was deathly afraid that if I rested for an extended period of time, I would get fat. And, like that, just the word fat in general, like is so subjective and really like is, like just throwing something on the wall. It like doesn't really mean anything, So it was definitely a learning experience for both myself as an athlete, myself as a practitioner,
Mhm.
and, just being a normal female human on this planet.
Right. Yeah. I
Um,
think less is more a lot of times for many individuals. And so just understanding too, if you're just starting out with resistance training or any part of your journey, you don't have to do an overhaul overnight. And sometimes that's actually going to be counterproductive. So finding that effective minimum dose is always my goal with people because, we're short on time, we're short on mental capacity, energy. And obviously, as you've experienced, I've had that same thing with clients of mine who are former athletes, where I actually have to be like, hey, maybe don't go for a 10-mile run on your off day. Like maybe we can pull that back a little bit. But
yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. So I just want to also say too, like I mentioned lifting weights, but that's not the only form of resistance training. So bands, your own body weight, like you mentioned, rucking. So rucking is, putting some weight in a backpack and going for a walk or a hike. Anything that is going to put that stress on your bone structure is also going to help you stave off osteoporosis and actually help you, build more bone. Because for those of you that aren't familiar with the ins and outs of the human body, our bones are constantly breaking down and rebuilding. But as we age, that also gets less. So we need to encourage it to keep doing that. We do that by adding what we call weight bearing or resistance. So just that's why it's important. And I had a practitioner at one point tell me that I didn't need to keep lifting weights. I was fine the way I was, and I appreciate her perspective. But she was like, she's like, if you get to where, I forget what age she said, and you break a leg, then you can go back to lifting weights. And I just looked at her and I said, if I get to that age and I break something, then I've already done something wrong. Then it's too late. So that's another reason. That's another concept to think about, is that you are preparing yourself when you're in your 20s, 30s, and 40s. You're preparing yourself really for your menopausal and postmenopausal age to be healthy, active, and strong. So I also want to bring that concept forward, is like, think of this as preparation for having an active, strong later life. And I know when we're in those earlier decades, it seems so far away. But it's not like false that for some weird reason, as we get older, time moves faster. Like, I don't know what that is, but it's a real thing.
I totally agree. And I feel like I say that every single year. And now I'm just like, I just don't say it because I'm like, I don't know what's happening, but there's a glitch in the matrix that is making that happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's still 24 hours in a day. There's still 365 days in a year, but it still seems to just keep getting faster and faster.
Right.
So my point is it'll be upon you before you realize it. And then you'll be like, man, how the hell did I get here? Why didn't I do all the things? But also in that same vein, it's never too late to start. So I also want everyone out there, regardless of what your age is, I don't care if you're 75 and listening to this. If you want to get stronger and feel better, you can. And it just takes, small steps a little bit every day, and your body will build upon itself.
Yeah. I would say right now, my most improved client, like meaning when she came to me, she had never worked out in her life, could barely do a body weight lunge. And now she's doing like trap bar deadlifts with weight and lunging with weight and doing Bulgarian split squats. And that's been over the course of like 8 or 9 months. And she's 53 years old and she has killed it. So it really is a testament to show that you can make good progress and you can start and get the benefits regardless of where you're at in life.
So I want to transition into a little bit more specific, like macro talk. So when I say macros, that's macronutrients. So that's fat, protein, carbs, those are the big three. And do you have an opinion, or do you have a practice or a recommendation that you make to your clients? And, obviously these can be very personalized, but I feel like we can also make some generalizations too. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say the caveat is, everything I do with my clients is very individualized based on my very lengthy intake process. But as kind of a general rule of thumb, so let's say we start with talking about protein. So for most individuals, if you're looking to build muscle, which most of the people that come to me want to lose weight, lose body fat, build muscle. They don't necessarily want to look like a bodybuilder, but they want to be stronger. They want to have better function, and they want to have better body composition. So with those types of individuals, there is no research that I have seen that shows that anything above 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is going to be any more helpful than being at a gram. Now, I typically bring people down because what I have seen from a lot of that research from the perspective of building muscle and body composition is anywhere from about like 0.7 grams per pound of body weight up to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Let me make sure I say that 10 times
no,
fast.
That's right.
Yeah. So I typically personally have clients be right at about 0.8 grams per pound of body fat. Now, if I'm looking at a macro split over the course of like, what does it look like, their calorie totals, I will oftentimes start people at a very balanced portion. So I might have them like 35% of their calories, 30 to 35% are coming from protein. Maybe 35 to 40% are coming from carbs. And maybe again, 30 to 35% are coming from fat. And I oftentimes will see how someone's body responds there. Now there is things that I will do differently if somebody comes in with very specific issues or very specific health history or conditions. I'm a big advocate of matching carb intake to activity levels as well. But I'm also not a huge fan of like low carb diets. I think they have a time and place for sure for specific individuals and for a specific time period. But I've seen people be on very low carb for a very long time and then have like issues with thyroid hormones and other things. And so I think as a short-term temporary solution, it can be beneficial for certain people, but not a long-term. And I think that's at least what I've seen a lot of like people, women specifically, be like, I'm so afraid of carbs. And I'm like, they won't hurt you, I promise. And so that's typically how I will start somebody. Now, again, that's going to kind of vary depending on the person and their experience. But I like to start from a more balanced perspective and really make sure that we're, again, addressing those foundations. And even though most of my clients have some sort of macro goal, what I'm really hounding is that micro level. Are we getting high quality food? Are we getting vitamins and minerals? Like, what are we doing to actually support the function of our body outside of just looking at macros?
Yeah. I guess the reason I asked is because I just wonder like if there's a large swath of women under protein, like under eating their protein. And so that's sort of like was my motivation with that question.
Okay, perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
I would say nine times out of 10, my clients that come to me are overall generally under eating, but particularly for sure when it comes to protein. And I understand protein is probably the hardest macronutrient to get in the diet if you're not intentionally cooking and you're not intentionally seeking it out. Like particularly with women who, maybe you're a working woman or you're a mom or you do both and you're constantly on the go and you don't feel like you have a lot of extra time. If we're just kind of grabbing like convenience foods or we're getting foods out at restaurants or fast food, like most of that stuff is not going to be very rich in protein unless you're like intentionally looking for those things. And so I think that combined with just not having maybe the knowledge for a lot of people about protein in particular is why, but I would 100% agree with that. And we know that as we age, it takes more protein to create muscle protein synthesis. So if you are looking to build muscle, we want to make sure that we're, as we age, getting that protein in the diet as well. So typically with my women who are, menopausal or approaching menopause, I will try to have them get at least 30 grams of protein in one sitting to help counteract that. Now, the caveat to that is as we age, our stomach acid also typically kind of decreases in production, and or if you're just a very highly stressed individual or you take medications or other things, you might have depleted stomach acid, which we know we need for proper protein digestion. So I often look at assessing that and addressing that at the same time. And I won't push high protein on somebody until we've addressed that issue, if it is an issue.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. So many things to say there. So, so true about the stomach acid issue. And so many Americans are on a PPI. So a Prilosec or a Protonix or a Nexium or a Prevacid, any of those things that actually inhibit that proton pump in your stomach that pumps out the acid. You need the acid. If you're having heartburn, it's actually not an acid problem. The problem with heartburn is a different mechanism, so to speak. And I won't geek out on you and explain all the nitty gritty. But just know that if you're one of these people out there that's on a long-term PPI, please, 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 please try to wean yourself off, work with a practitioner. There's also, I don't know about you, but I use usually like a supplement little triad to help rebalance that stomach acid. And I've had great success on getting almost all of my clients off of their PPI, off of the calcium carbonate, which is Tums train. And then if they are still having a little bit of reflux here and there, then I like to use I always mispronounce this, but it's the deglycerized licorice.
Yes, the DGL.
DGL
for short. Yeah. I'm impressed that you tried to say it. I was like, I stick with acronyms.
So, and again, like there are consequences to not only, breaking down protein when we eat it and assimilating it into our body as necessary, but also other nutrients. So if you're not able to break down the food in your stomach as we're meant to with that acid, then later on down in the digestive tract, you're not going to be getting the nutrient absorption that you need, which we know long-term consequences of PPIs. Now, one of the things is osteoporosis, which we're already trying to prevent. So, so there's that. What else? So the other thing I wanted to ask you about was with these macro calculations, specifically the protein, do you use ideal body weight or do you use their actual?
I will typically use their actual unless they're somebody who is very, very, very overweight and we're just really focusing on getting that weight down. I'm not going to have somebody who's 230 pounds eating 230 grams of protein. If I have somebody who's maybe more in that 130 to 160 range, and they, we might have some body fat to lose perhaps, depending on their stature and their goal, but they're maybe more in a normal body weight range, then I will follow that rule a little bit more. But yes, if somebody is we have a higher amount of weight that we need to lose, then I will just kind of adjust that accordingly. Or that's when I might go in and say, okay, I'm going to make 30 to 35% of their calorie intake to be protein and not necessarily base it on their weight or ideal weight.
Okay. Yeah. So if any of you are out there wanting to DIY these numbers for yourself, if you're there, you can just Google ideal body weight calculator and put your numbers in and it'll give you a number. And I don't want you to stress out if you're nowhere near the number. It's okay. We're just using this as a marker to calculate your protein intake for the day. And then obviously you would divide that into how many times you're going to eat or how many times you want to have protein at a meal, which ideally I'm hoping you're having protein at almost every meal. So whether you're intermittent fasting or not.
Yes.
So do you also recommend that if when someone breaks their fast, meaning even if that's just an overnight, like a normal dinner, sleep, then breakfast, that they load up with that 30 grams of protein like first thing?
I do recommend, again, more so for my women who are closer to menopause or in menopause with that 30 grams, but I do recommend people have protein in some capacity with their first meal of the day, especially if you are somebody who's having coffee, first thing or as you're breaking your fast. I know there's research to support that, but I can just speak anecdotally from myself too. Having protein in the morning, my energy is so much more stable throughout the morning and into the afternoon. I don't feel like I get that jittery high and then crash from caffeine. My adrenals feel much more stable. I've had really great success with myself and clients from a body recomposition standpoint by doing that, amongst many other things as well. But yes, I do recommend, if possible. Now, if that is not feasible, like you have a day where you can't get 30 grams of protein with your breakfast and you're like, well, I'm just not going to eat. I would still rather you eat some high quality food to break your fast when the time is appropriate. But yes, I do typically have women try to incorporate protein in some capacity, typically at least 20 to 25 grams up to perhaps 30 for those women who are starting to age and might need a greater quantity at every single sitting.
Yeah, I'm glad that you also mentioned the body composition shift too, because I think that's something that we, again, as women, with all the things that we've been bombarded with our entire life from all the magazines and the look this way and do this to, get your buns of steel or whatever it is. It's like we have to fuel our body for the outcome that we want. And you literally you can't be a bodybuilder, and you can't even like build muscle if you don't have the building blocks. And that building block is protein. So just keep that in mind, all of you out there. Like this, it really does take, a perspective shift. Like it's getting out of that old paradigm and opening ourselves up to the reality of how our bodies work at a biological level. And you don't need to know the nitty gritty. Just know that protein is the building block to muscle. The end. And, and so that like, if you are moving and working out and you're stressing your muscles enough to where they need to be replenished and built up, then you're gonna need that fuel to do that. So I hope that helps some of you out there. I can just still like feel that old mantra of, I don't want to get bulky. I don't want to,
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yes. I still hear it. And I'm like, trust me, even if you're a bodybuilder, it takes a lot of time, consistency, very specific strategy. And for a lot of even women in the bodybuilding community, not all of them, I was not one of them, but use of anabolic steroids. And so I think that if people can take away anything, it's just knowing that like when you see somebody in a magazine or you see someone on social media, not to say that they inherently do those things or don't do those things, but you really don't know what's going into it. And so that's something I talk with clients about all the time from the get-go is like, what are our goals and what's the realistic expectation of what it's going to take to get there? Because you don't know everything that's going into it. And, again, it's really hard for most women to get big and bulky, even if you're lifting weights. Like in my experience with my clients and myself, the style that we do, we don't train like power lifters either. So there's a little bit of, nuance in that if we were going to get really nitty gritty, but most of the time you look smaller, you look firmer, and you just look more fit overall.
Yeah, your basal metabolic rate, goes up. It goes up. And so the more muscle you have, the more fat you're going to burn just at baseline, just when you are sitting on the couch enjoying yourself.
And who doesn't want that?
Yeah. All right. So what else? Where do we need to go from here? You did talk a little bit about low carb. And when you say that, did you mean something as extreme as keto or?
Yes to keto, but also what I typically consider low carb is like, I guess it depends. I would say under 100 grams, like specifically under 75 grams, which starts to, you start getting into the keto territory. But really just whether it's an intentional diet or just women unintentionally not having carbs because they think they're going to make them fat or they're afraid of carbs or things like that. So yes, somewhat to keto, but just kind of that general thought process of, carbs are scary. They're bad for me. I'm going to gain weight, that whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, definitely there is research out there, and I can also speak anecdotally for if you are a woman that is interested in the low carb lifestyle, cycle yourself in and out, because the damage comes when you try to stay in a state of, especially ketosis specifically. And even if you're testing and doing all the things, then it's really hard on a female body. So it's just something to be aware of. Like, yes, you can still practice keto and go in and out, but I would definitely recommend cycling. And so
I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
I've had times in my life too where I've done lower carb and I felt great on it. I can tell you if I did lower carb right now, I would be a very different person having this conversation. I would not be happy. So I think too, just tuning into your body and understanding that your lived experience and what you're feeling is going to trump, any research or anything that any health professional or person out there on the internet screaming about a particular diet is going to say, because what you're experiencing is your reality. And so if you have lower carb and you kind of trend that way and you feel good, great, you can do that. But like you said, cycle in and out of it. Don't stay in one place forever. I'm actually a huge proponent of diet variety as well. So even if, you're not, let's say you are doing more of a moderate approach to your nutrition. Sometimes I will take myself through a week or two where I go low protein, or I do go lower carb, or I kind of switch things up. Or I will try to really prioritize introducing foods that I don't eat all the time, and not things that bother me, but just different types of veggies, different types of fruit, different types of proteins, and just really try to have a variety and cycle myself out in and out of different phases like that.
Yes, I'm a big proponent of seasonal eating, and so eating with the seasons, and I think that helps keep up the interest in food, knowing that as something, like we've moved now, we're recording this in November, and so like we're moving away from many of those summer fruits, and we're moving more into like root vegetable season and squashes and oranges and apples and those sorts of things. So there's something really to be said, like with practicing that, and it really reinforcing that evolutionary of like cycle that we've all been through as humans. And I think it sort of like grounds us back into being in touch with what season is it outside, and like it's just a good thing, I think. Beside the nutrient variety, but also like it should complement the sun cycles too, and how much, again, going back to how much sleep are you getting, when are you eating, when are you resting, what types of food. So like things that'll be more warm and nourishing when it's cold outside. So a lot of these things that you'll hear about through like an Ayurvedic or some sort of ancient Asian approach is very simple. It doesn't have to be complicated and associated with your dosha if that seems overwhelming to you. Just eat with what's seasonal, start there.
I will say
Oh,
sorry. I was going to say I have like 10 years into learning about Ayurveda, and I'm like still like, what is my dosha again? Like I feel like I'm this, but I might also be this. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. So all right. Well, we're getting towards the end of our time together. So what are some maybe last minute things that you want to bring forward that we haven't talked about yet?
Okay, I'll give 3. Somebody asked me on a podcast once, they were like, what are your 3 parting thoughts? And I'm like, oh my God, great question. So the first thing that I wish everybody, whether you're male, female, whatever stage of life that you're in, is that, taking ownership of your health is crucial. Like and again, you can work with myself or another health practitioner or your doctor or whomever, but you are the expert in your own experience. And so, you might not know the ins and outs of the body, or might not know everything about a condition or a supplement or a medication, but you know what you're experiencing, and that is very real. And so I think taking ownership and having that autonomy in your process of health is very important, because, there's a lot of doctors, a lot of practitioners, a lot of people out there that want to pretend like they know better than you when it comes to your experience, but your experience better than anybody else. Number 2 is that I think we didn't really talk about this, but we're really big into the self-love movement right now, which I think is absolutely wonderful. What I always like to remind people is that sometimes what is going to be most beneficial for you and most loving for yourself is doing the hard thing that does not feel super great in the moment. Maybe that is going for a walk. Maybe it's going to bed early. Maybe it's like doing that thing that you're just like, ugh, I know I'm supposed to be doing this, but I don't really want to do that. And so I think, again, kind of going back to that taking ownership of our health and our own experience, sometimes the most loving thing that we can do to support ourselves is, doing the thing that might feel hard in the moment that we know is going to benefit us later, and is not necessarily like going to retail therapy or, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think that we get very lost in the like treat yourself movement, which is great to treat yourself, and everybody listening to this, please go treat yourself, but treat yourself to something that is going to make you feel good and is going to, get you further along to where you want to be. And the third one is just start somewhere. I think, there's so much, even as a practitioner, like I have to turn off my social media. I have to get off the internet sometimes, because there's so much conflicting information out there, and there's so many people, there's so much noise essentially. And so just understand that there's a time and place for almost every different kind of diet, healing modality, whatever it is. And so if somebody is telling you that this way is the only way, it's not true. There's a time and place for everything. So just
run the other way.
Right, exactly. And so it can become very, very overwhelming. I get overwhelmed, and I have much more knowledge in this than most people, especially the average American. And so I think if you feel overwhelmed and you feel confused and you don't know where to start, just pick one thing that you really know is going to benefit you. And going back to the beginning of our conversation, any one of those foundational things is going to benefit everybody. And so just pick one of those things and just start working on it and build on that. Don't feel like you have to completely burn down the castle and rebuild it overnight. And don't feel like you have to like listen to this person and this person and this person and this person. If you feel like you're being bombarded with things, just ignore almost all of it.
Yes. Well, how much time do you have? Do you have a few more minutes? We can
I
talk
do.
about.
Perfect.
Okay. Then we can talk about that whole self-love, dynamic that we're in. Again, one of those buzzwords.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely think that it is important for women to find a way to love yourself, no matter where you are and what size, but also knowing that obesity, stagnancy, meaning like not moving at all, has dire health consequences. And so to me, self-love means loving myself enough to not allow myself or, to go too far in one direction. I mean, again, we're all human. We all fluctuate. There's been times in my life where I've been 30 pounds heavier than I am now, and it didn't feel good, but, it was just where I was at my life in that moment. But I brought myself, sort of let the pendulum swing back the other way, so to speak. So like you said, yes, go you to your 2 cents.
Yes, no, I'm literally 100% agree with that. And I think what I always tell my clients is like self-love and self-improvement are not mutually exclusive. And I agree with you. And I think that a lot of it is about the intention behind what we're doing. Are we seeking to lose weight because we don't feel worthy? We don't love ourselves. We need that validation perhaps. Because if that's the case, then that's, not necessarily the healthiest or most loving reasons to embark on something. But I think that, complacency or allowing ourselves to stay in a place where we don't feel good, we don't show up the way that we want, we're not living the life that we want. Like, life is short, y'all. That's one thing I learned from losing my mom. She was only 60 years old, and I saw her work her entire life to give our family opportunity and comfort. And she had this grand plan of what she was going to do when she retired, and she never got to do it. And so just witnessing that, I really realized like life is happening right now. Like, yes, we want to plan for the future. We want to set ourselves up physically, financially, whatever that looks like for the future. But like, life is right now. And if we're just allowing ourselves to stay in a place where we don't feel good and we're not enjoying life and we're not living to, what our fullest capacity is, whatever that means for each individual, then I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And I don't think that we're acting in the capacity of loving ourselves. So I think that, twofold, like learning to love yourself and appreciate your body for everything that it does for us, regardless of your shape, your size, where you're at in life, what you've done in the past, is crucial to the healing journey. But also understanding that, when we really love ourselves, we're much more inclined to take the steps that we need to take to feel our best and to show up our best.
Yeah, like you said, like willing to do the hard things. But because also like realize those hard things are just temporary, like I woke up at 5 a.m. this morning. I meditated. I came in here in my office. I recorded a show. I went back and I exercised, so like, and then, I did a short little TikTok about my morning routine because it was front of mind. And, one of the things is like, why on God's green earth would you get up at 5 a.m.? Like, if you don't have someone chasing you out of bed, like, why? But the reason is because, like I said in my post on TikTok, is because these things have become my non-negotiables. I know that if I wake up and I meditate and then exercise, for me, I'm going to feel good throughout the rest of my day. That's going to set me up for success no matter what I'm doing and who I'm interacting with. It's going to put me in a better frame of mind. I'm going to feel good about myself and about the rest of the world, hopefully for the most part, if I don't watch too much news.
Amen to that.
But, so again, it's about finding, self-love is finding what works for you and doing that. And, so, yeah, It's no one else's definition but your own. But just, I would say, like, again, with anything, it seems like there's a lot of noise out there. And so just get curious, decide. It took me a long time to transition from being a graveyard shift worker to a morning 5 a.m. person. And if anyone that's known me for most of my life, they'd be like, no, she's not a morning person. But now, for the most part, I am. And I'm really proud of myself for making that transition, because it has helped me be productive and happy in so many other ways in my life. And so I think that's the other thing too, is like when we start to get open and curious and try different things, even if they're not fun, like I definitely wasn't happy when the alarm went off at 5 a.m. But I was like, all I have to do is sit up and, get my butt on that meditation cushion and meditate. That's not hard.
Right.
But getting past the sleep at the 5 a.m. part's hard. But once, so just you do you, but
Right. Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
I also think one last thing to tack onto that is for women particularly. I've been seeing this a lot, especially this last year, but like sometimes self-love is like saying no or setting boundaries or like just letting go of the burden that we place on ourselves to be all the things to all the people. Like that's okay too. And I think that those things we don't talk about enough in the context of health transformation. Because we really are like, women, we're trying to have careers and raise families and hold the fort down at the house and socialize and, all of those things. It's a freaking lot. It is a lot. And I don't have kids. So I'm like, I can imagine it's going to be a lot when that happens. Yeah. And so just understanding too, that sometimes self-love is like saying no, or just literally doing you, like do what you want to do and forget what society or what other people are telling you should be doing.
Yeah. No is a complete and loving sentence.
Love it.
All right. Well, this has been Allie Cass on Light Body Radio. Thank you so much. Oh, tell people where they can find you. We haven't talked about that yet.
Yes. So I am most active on Instagram, is my chosen social platform at the moment. My handle is at Allie Cass Health, or you can visit my website, www.alliecasshealth.com. You can read a little bit more about me, my background, my programs. And if you have questions or just want to connect, I would love to hear from you.
Awesome. And as always, everything that she listed in terms of links and all that good stuff will be on our show notes page, which is drlaramay.com/podcasts. So thank you everyone for tuning in. And as always, we love to hear your feedback, like, comment, share, all the good things. And we'll catch you on the next episode.